Good morning. My name is John Leopold. I'm the director of the Central Coast K-16 Regional Collaborative, and I want to welcome you to this webinar about our Cycle 2 funding allocation process. Today, we're going to try to cover a couple of different things. If you could go to the next slide. We just want to set the stage why we're doing this, give you a review of this grant opportunity. Most importantly, talk in depth about what is in the application and be able to answer your questions, as well as providing some tips in order to make this go as easily as possible. So let's just talk about setting the stage. And then actually the next one, the Central Coast K-16 Regional Collaborative has been working to advance equity to improve student economic success. We have both a North Star and a Near Star. The North Star, what we are working on is to create a Central Coast region in which historically marginalized achieve their goals within K-16 education and local industry and secure high wage, high impact careers that advance opportunities for upward mobility. That is a lofty goal. And importantly, the Collaborative Steering Committee has determined that their 3-year near star focus would be improving outcomes for socially, economically disadvantaged students as a critical first step towards achieving that North Star. In the first 3 years of our collaborative, including this Cycle 2 grant opportunity, the collaborative is focused on systemic change to improve outcomes for socially, economically disadvantaged students throughout the regions. You'll see this focus on this student population throughout the collaborative work and all the subgrant expectations. Next slide. The collaborative has 3 main goals. We want to increase the alignment of K-16 educational system to best support students' post-secondary aspirations. We want to break down the silos that separate the segments of the educational continuum to improve the outcome for students. We want to disrupt the inequitable system and structures in our institutions. This is incredibly important, and something that to think about with your own grant application is what are we funding to be able to really look at the systemic change necessary to create a more equitable system. And lastly, we want to build on our students' strength, assets, and rich cultural and linguistic contributions to prepare them for economic mobility in the region. How do we build
Yes.
on those strengths to ensure that students can have the greatest mobility in the shortest period of time to access those family supporting wage jobs? So I want you to keep in mind these goals as we move through. Next slide. The collaborative has actually been working for nearly 3 years in both a planning and implementation phase. Part of that was looking at labor market information to determine which careers to focus on. Here on the Central Coast, not actually the Central Coast, but the Central Coast, we are looking at 2 different career pathways, one around healthcare and the other broadly around engineering and computer science. We chose these because there's lots of openings within our region and around our region, and that these jobs pay well, and that you can move through the educational continuum to be able to access jobs at different points in the pathway. Next slide. So let's talk about the grant opportunity specifically. One of the things that I want to draw your attention at is, first of all, if you've been to our retreats, either in the North region or the South region, some of this won't be new. It will actually be something that you've heard before, but it's critically important for the work of the collaborative, and so we're just going to briefly review that. As I mentioned, our work is centered around equity. And we have our equity-centered values, and we look at our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging lens and all the work that we do. When we think about equity, we look to identify, disrupt, and eliminate systemic equities. We commit to data-informed practices, and then you'll see this in the application. We want to build on the community strength, assets, and aspirations, and work with our communities to ensure that we're building pathways that really make a difference. And we want to collaborate with communities to ensure fair representations of voices and student self-determination. In the next month, we will be adding students to our steering committee to make sure their voice is well heard through this pathway process. As we look at that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging lens, we want you to be asking the same questions that we're asking. And what we fund, what is the intended outcome and impact? How have we attained input from those who are going to be engaged and impacted by this decision? What beliefs or biases are underlying the planning process? What potential negative outcomes or unintended outcomes could occur? Is the plan reasonable, attainable, and sustainable? And how and to whom will the proposed plan be communicated? These values and lens guide the development of our grant opportunities, and it should be reflected in your plans that come to us, and it'll be the lens in which we will be looking at all these grant applications. The next slide. In this cycle two process, our second round of funding, each subregion within the Central Coast region has a particular priority. In the northern counties of Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz County, the pathway priority for this cycle of funding is engineering and computer science. You still will be able to seek funding to fill gaps that might have been identified in our first round of funding on healthcare pathways. In the north, we will have at least $2.17 million to allocate. For our southern partners in San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties, the pathway priority is healthcare. And we will still be seeking funding to fill the gaps that we identified in our cycle one process around engineering and computer pathways. In the South, there is about $4.54 million. The reason why these numbers are different is that using our equity process, we wanted to ensure that the money went where the greatest number of students were. And in the three southern region counties, there are more students who are socially economic disadvantaged. And so that's why the southern counties receive more money than the northern counties. All the money that we allocate will be done through a formula allocation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But these are non-competitive fund, which means that if you are in an intersegmental partnership that is aligned with these pathways and working to reach the targeted group, you will be funded. The next slide.
Nice.
So what is the minimum requirements for these sub-regional grants? We expect that our schools and post-secondary partners will use the funds to create real intersegmental partnerships to expand or establish pathways in the two areas that we've looked at. We'll be talking more about those requirements in a moment. We want you to implement these recovery with equity recommendations that have been identified by the state and which have been chosen by our collaborative to improve enrollment and success for socially, economically disadvantaged students in each of the pathways. Importantly, we want you to identify and disrupt those systemic inequities, and barriers. This is incredibly important because if we just seek to fund the systems that are in place, we know from looking at the data that we're not reaching the folks that we intend to. So we want you to think differently about it. We also want you to participate in data collection, reporting, and evaluation. And for our K-12 partners, at a minimum, we want you to participate in CCGI, the California College Guidance Initiative. But we are also looking at our post-secondary partners to figure out how to engage you with the CCGI program. Next slide. our what we're really counting on in these funding proposals is for folks to collaborate. Um, we want these we want to see some collaboration that is more than aspirational but is actual. And we want you to connect with the K-12, the community college system, the four-year university, and industry partners together. Uh, we want to make sure that we've designed an application that is to be completed collaboratively and for you to identify your partners at the beginning. And we are hoping that the partners are actually going to share and split up the work and not just have one carry the whole group. And our staff is available to help connect and support the collaboration to ensure that we have very effective intersegmental partnerships to fund now and into the futures. Next slide. So how do we do the funding? Our collaborative has decided to use a formula-based funding model, which is a base amount for each entity. What we're saying for our K-12 partners is at least $50,000, and for our post-secondary partners, $40,000. But then there are multipliers that are based on equity goals that our collaborative has chosen. Those allocation amounts will depend on the number of institutions that are participating in this grant opportunity and the number of socially economic disadvantaged students at your school district or involved in your programs. At the community colleges and the four-year university, we use a slightly different number involving the Pell Grants, Promise Grants, AB 540 at our community colleges. And for our four-year universities, we use Pell Grants. We also look at the number of people in the program. We need you to identify your partners and fill out a letter of intent, which is going to be part of the application, when you'll hear about it in a moment. So we can tell how many people are participating in the program. So we can tell you in early October how much your institution or your partnership could earn. After we see all the applications, we may reach out to and explore alignment of similar pathways and/or strategies. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go on. Next slide. So the timeline, many of you have already started talking to your partners, and we want you to start working on building those student journey maps to really identify what the actual connections are between the partners in these intersegmental partnerships, to identify gaps, look at student need and opportunities. But what we need by September 30th is that letter of intent, which is a broad brush of the partnership. Not all the details have to be worked out by September 30th. In early October, we will work with you and talk with you as these are building to notify you of how much funding there is, but also making sure that the partnerships are strong, or figuring out where there might be help that's necessary to make it as strong as possible. Lastly, on October 25th, we would want to see your completed application. In there, we would want a student journey map. We'd want to have some idea of whether the strategies that your suggestion are evidence-based. We want you to identify the systemic changes and what kind of sustained impact this funding might bring. And we want some baseline data and where you think you'll be able to increase participation, persistence, graduation, and achievement of our overall goals. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to Alex. She's going to talk in specific about the application. And I just wanted you to know that myself, Ashley Selk, Isaac Castro will be around today, tomorrow, in the coming weeks to be able to help you out. Thank you for being here today, and thank you, Alex, for the work that you and your team have put together to create this application.
Thank you, John, and thank you for the opportunity to share and speak and meet with you all today. My name is Alexandra Lozanoff. I am a senior project manager with West Ed, which is a technical assistance and research and evaluation firm. I'm joined here with my colleagues Ayana Smith and David Maduli, and we really had the pleasure and the honor of supporting the Central Coast K-16 Regional Collaborative since the early days of this group getting together to apply for a planning grant to support sort of the creation of this. So it's a real honor to both see your wonderful staff, to see all of you here today, and knowing that a lot of work is now about to materialize in getting more funding and services and support out to students. So we are here to walk through the application and answer any and all questions that you have. We have just about 40 minutes left, so we are going to move both as deliberately and as slowly as we can while also aiming to get through this application. David is on hand to answer any questions that you have, so please add those in the chat as we go. Ayana and I will be taking turns to sort of hopefully demystify this application and make it feel as accessible as we really intended it to be when it was developed. So I want to start just by re-emphasizing a few key pieces. So some of this you've already just heard from John, but are some of the pieces that really makes this grant opportunity and this application process unique. And so we want to make sure that it's really clear to all of you as you embark on this planning process. So first and foremost, wanted to stress that grants are non-competitive. Partners who qualify and join a partnership that fulfill those minimum requirements will receive the funding that's allocated to them to use as part of their intersegmental partnership. That also means that applications are not going to be assessed in a typical format with a points and a cutoff score that determines whether or not you get funding. Instead, collaborative staff will be reviewing applications to provide coaching, revisions, suggestions, and to support that, ensure that all partners are positioned to use funds for systemic change and really support that, both the equity-centered mission and the collaboration priority there. So please know that this was designed to be inviting, to really build on your expertise and the lived expertise and all of the amazing work that you all are doing, while also kind of creating that space for that collaboration and coaching. And so just know that walking in. That we are looking for one application per intersegmental partnership pathway. That means that it's not one application per partner, but rather per partnership. So when you look at this application, you should not be imagining that you are going to be, or your institution will be answering every question all on your own. Rather, as John mentioned earlier, it was designed to be created and developed collaboratively. It also means that we really encourage you to capitalize on the strength of that collaboration, recognizing particularly many of you in K-12 have competing applications and really big applications coming up with CTIG and SWP. We recognize that, and so we really also encourage you to leverage the strength of the partnerships, and for our post-secondary partners who may have a little bit more capacity to take a step at taking on some of the writing or submitting of these in a way that can really help lighten the load across the full partnership. Notably, funding can be combined across partners. So partners will receive funding amount based on their allocation and the funding formula, but partners then can combine those funds and determine where those funds will make the biggest difference based on the needs of their students. So for example, if 4 partners were eligible for $50K, for a total pot of $200K, so let's say that's 2 K-12s, 1 community college, 1 4-year, they could actually combine all of that and then determine that 150 will go to 1 partner or 2 partners where the majority of services are being offered based on that, based on the needs of the students. Or folks may decide that that each institution will spend their allocation within their institution in service of these shared goals. That's completely up to the partnership to decide, but know that that there's that flexibility. Okay. And then finally, If partners are deciding that they both want to establish a cycle 2 priority pathway and also fill gaps that existed from the cycle 1 funding for those that participated in cycle 1, that is absolutely an option. It will require 2 applications because it was going to be too much to try and fit a sort of 2 different pathways into the application. And so just be ready that that will require sort of two applications and a decision about how the funding will be spent across those 2 different pathways. I just want to pause, since those are fairly unique, we hope, fairly good news, but a little different. And so I want to just pause, see if there's any immediate questions about those key reminders. I think I see one from Ebony.
One, this is already exceptional. I know we've heard it, but hearing it all together in the midst of needing to get it done. Thank you for everything you guys have prepared. I appreciate you delineating that if we had stuff from our healthcare pathways that we wanted in here, we need 2 applications. What's still not clear, if you're estimating 2, a 50 and 40, and maybe even 40, I don't know, but let's say 100K, making up a number. Do I need to think about, with my collaboratives, the 100K over both of those applications? Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right. Well, let's move to the letter of intent, but please continue to add questions in the chat if anything else comes up there. Okay, so the letter of intent is not a letter. That's probably the first place to start. It is 3 tabs within an application spreadsheet with the idea that we want this key information, but we are not expecting any, articulate, narrative, groundbreaking sort of framing. This is about collecting necessary information to inform and allow the collaborative staff to determine the funding allocations and ensure that sort of the partnerships, that folks are finding their partnerships and that are planning specific pathways. So there are 3 sections of this letter of intent, which is really, again, the first 3 tabs of the application template. We want to ask for a primary contact for the partnership. So this could be from any one of the partners involved. This should be the person who's taking that Google Sheet and making a copy, who's sharing it out with partners, and who will ultimately sort of take that ownership to make sure that it is submitted in time. We're asking for this, one, so that also if the collaborative staff, they have questions, they know who they go to. And because we know that the reality of distributed leadership means that sometimes it's just easier for things like sending emails to fall through the cracks. So we're looking for that one person who has the time and the space to really carry that work forward, and be that point of contact. Similarly, each partner should have at least 1 point person. If there are more than 1 point person, then please, you can list those in different lines in the template. And we're asking for just a short summary of the history and collaboration and motivation for the collaboration. Why did this set of partners come together? And then we're also want to know, what support do you need moving forward? You'll have about a month to complete the rest of the application. How can your collaborative staff be most helpful to you? And what other support and resources might be helpful? And if it's just a series of questions, that works too. But this is the chance for us to really codify sort of understanding what the support is that might be needed. Really, the biggest piece is that selected pathway. So we want to know what specific pathway you'll be building together and expanding. We want to know what is the unmet labor market need that's being addressed there. And a part of that really is so that you all are having honest conversations as a group to really identify and make sure that the pathways that you're building are going into jobs and occupations that do have some demand. And then within that, we'll ask for 3 target occupations, along with course top and zip codes. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. And then finally, we want the list of grant contacts for each institution. That's contact information for a PI or principal investigator, the contract signatory, and the fiscal agent. The reason why we're asking for this up front is that because each institution receiving funding will enter into a contract with the collaborative operational backbone, which is UCSC, and this information will really streamline getting those contracts processed so that everyone can get the funding as quickly as possible. Okay. I want to just show the letter of intent quickly. This is what the application template looks like. And you'll see we have section 1, section 2, and section 3. So that is, again, what is considered our quote unquote letter of intent. So section 1, you can enter the primary contact for partnership and then point people for K-12, community colleges, and universities here. And then we have, again, small areas for you to share the history of collaboration and the support that you need. Second is the selected pathway. We have some drop downs to make that as easy as possible to identify which of the pathways this application will be detailing. And then the name of your pathway. So we know healthcare could include a lot. Maybe it's community health workers, maybe it is nursing, et cetera. And then a short description of those unmet labor needs, and then information about occupation. I think there was some discussion or some mention that there were some resources around labor market data. I'll ask the collaborative staff if that, and to share any of those resources in the chat. And then we end with a place to add in your course top and zip codes. For any of you who were saying, what in the world is that? I came from the world of college access and success, and I had no idea what those were before I started at WestEd. So I will talk about those in just a minute. But then we have our section 3, our grant contacts here. So that's the template. This is a read-only copy, I believe, I hope. And so the point person should make a copy, share this with all of your partners participating so everyone has access and can go in and add this information themselves. Okay, I'm going to go back to our deck now. And just sort of cover what we mean by course top and zip codes. So some of you may, I think, live this every day. I see Layla on the line. Some of you may know this very well. For some of you, this may be different. But just this idea is that courses at K-12 and then programs at community college and post-secondaries have codes that allow us to align and understand that there are, different programs, different courses have different names, but have the same sort of learning outcome skills. And so these codes allow us to align and understand what these pathways will look like across different institutions, and they allow us to find these programs in public data. So we are asking for course codes. So these are your CDE course codes for any courses that will be involved in the pathway. And of course, likely to have CTE course codes that align with 15 industry sectors. So I will be asking for those as relevant. For taxonomy of program, those are the codes assigned to courses, certificates, and degrees by California community colleges. And you see actually a nice example here of what those top codes look like within the community colleges. So there's the 12, the discipline is health, then there might be a subdiscipline of nursing, and then within that, there may be a specific, even more specificity around licensed vocational nursing, certified nursing assistant, et cetera. And then the classification of instructional programs is what all other post-secondary institutions use to classify their programs. You all are welcome to get as specific as it makes sense, particularly at the top code level, as specific as it makes sense for how narrow or wide your pathway may be. And then, yes, Kristen, thank you for clarifying the CalPADS codes for CTE. Yes. All right. So again, Why are we doing this? So that actually that your collaborative staff can help track the outcomes in publicly available data. So this will, the goal here is that will ultimately lighten your load because collaborative staff will be able to help track outcomes and then develop their shared understanding of pathways across the region. If for those of you who are really unfamiliar, we encourage you to contact your county offices of ed or your departments of institutional research. Those are going to be the places that are likely, most likely to be familiar with those codes. All right. Any other questions around our quote unquote letter of intent? Then I will, I think, transition to, oh, I did not mean to stop sharing. I apologize. But I'll get that right back up. But I'll be transitioning over to Ayana to walk through the next section. Is that? All right. And we're back. We are.
Thank you, Alex. You can go to the next slide. So here's an overview of the sections that are included within the application. As a reminder, sections 1 through 3 are those letter of intent sections that are due September 30th. The remaining sections are due October 25th, and those are the executive summary, the outcome sections, CCGI, evaluation and continuous improvement, and the budget section. So understanding that these tabs in the Google Sheet may look overwhelming, but there are only 5 categories of questions that you'll be responding to. And next, we'll review the questions that are in each section. Next slide, please. So section 4 is the executive summary section. There are 4 questions that will need a collaborative response from all partners. These questions are providing a summary of your proposed intersegmental partnership, highlight emerging data supporting the need for the selected pathway, explain how the pathway will fulfill the 3 goals of the Central Coast K-16 Regional Collaborative. Within the application, those 3 goals are outlined for you to respond to each specific goal. And lastly, highlight any other systems level strategies that have been successful in building pathways previously that you can reference. As a note, there are examples also provided in the application to help guide your answer. So if you're having any confusion about what a question is asking, feel free to refer to those examples to help guide your response. Next slide, please. Section 5 is where you will identify the intended outcomes of your pathway. There are multiple tabs for reporting outcomes within the application, including the pathway design and implementation section. This section includes only one question, which asks you to describe the extent to which you have a completed pathway that includes a student journey map, dual enrollment, as well as industry-aligned courses, and also describe the action steps that you will implement to complete your selected pathway. As a reference, we have here for you the requirements for established pathways. Within the application, these are referred to as pathway design elements. As a note, these requirements were established by the state funder, and they are that there's at least one industry-connected course offered at each education institution level. There are work-based learning opportunities to satisfy employer expectations. There are employer commitments that are aligned to employment opportunities. There are articulated agreements between education segments. And there is a student journey map, which I believe, David, if you could pop that link in the chat, there is a template available for you to complete and submit along with your application. Any questions about section 5? Okay, I will pass it back to Alex.
Okay. Thank you, Ayana. All right, so moving right along to our student outcomes, our short-term student outcome sections. So we know and recognize that this section may feel overwhelming. And so our goal today really is to deconstruct this in a way that communicates it as a very digestible with kind of clear steps and makes it feel a little bit more manageable, because ultimately our goal was really to think about how to ask and understand what your plans were in a way that would provide the most clarity for you all and for the collaborative. So essentially there are a set of short-term student outcomes that are expected as part of this work. So these are the student level outcomes that are intended to be achieved through these subgrant work. And these were determined and approved by the steering committee. And so there are some outcomes that are applicable across all partners. So these outcomes are that socioeconomically disadvantaged students in particular are enrolling, persisting, and completing in the pathway. That they are participating in internships, work-based learning, and other experiential learning. And that they are succeeding in courses. So that the measure of that is course success rate in CTE and pathway aligned courses. So those are outcomes that we're expecting all partners to work through. Then there's a few other student short-term outcomes that are partner specific. So at the K-12 level, the expectation is around increasing the number of students, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, who have a registered California Colleges.edu account and who complete the FAFSA and DREAM Act, recognizing that that now is a requirement, but it is also still a work in progress across for our students. Community colleges in particular have outcomes related to increased completion of 9 CTE units and increased completion of transfer level math and English. And then finally, all post-secondary, which includes community college as well as the 4 years, have short-term outcomes around earning units completed to our pathway degree. So there are different tabs for each of these sections so that you all can share your plans for how to advance and how you will be improving these outcomes. So for each of these, on each of these tabs, for each of these outcomes, we're asking for essentially a few different sets of information. One, what's your baseline data? And then what are your targets in 2025 and 2026? And then what are the activities that you'll implement to advance those goals? And the reason why we structured the application and the questions around this is because we wanted to be really specific about tying what this work would mean for students and what the work was planned. Because we think that that sort of level of connection and clarity and bounding the implementation activities specifically to these outcomes, we hope will provide sort of clarity and prioritization. We know with having a wide open range of sort of outcomes and activities that in itself can be really overwhelming. And so we wanted to tie activities to what it is that the collaborative is looking and hoping to change for students. Okay. Excellent. So within that, we are asking for a few more questions related to these outcomes and the activities that you're planning. And that is, we'll ask you to simply provide check boxes and explain and show how and where these efforts are going to align with the requirements set forth by the state. So the state is requiring, as part of this funding opportunity, that collaboratives implement at least 4 recovery with equity strategies. So those are cultivate inclusive, engaging, and equity-oriented learning environments, retaining students through inclusive support, providing high-tech, high-contact advising, a little bit of a tongue twister there, and support college preparation and early credit. Similarly, the state is requiring these pathway design elements that Ayana had set forth earlier. Now, I think it's important to note that these are really high-level strategies and requirements, and we know that they could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. We also felt that the work that was going to be a lot more meaningful was around how you all would be advancing towards these outcomes and what it is that you would be implementing. And so for that reason, we are inviting you to sort of interpret these in the context of your own work and self-identify which of these will be fulfilled by which of your activities. So to be very clear, the reason why we're sort of asking you to look around and think about which of these are fulfilled by your various implementation activities is for compliance. And so it is that we know that sort of the expectations from the state will be implemented, but implemented in a way that is contextually makes sense for your work. So we do really encourage you to review all the intended activities and ensure that throughout the application, you are meeting each recovery with equity and pathway design element. However, given how aligned these are to the student success and pathway work, we are also quite confident that you'll find it pretty natural that to fulfill these sorts of requirements within your already planned work. Okay. That was a lot. We'll actually transition to the outcomes tabs for a minute so you can see that in progress. But yeah, let's pause to see if there's some questions. Chance.
Just a question, because I feel like at the K-12 level, like there's a CTE pathway that people are going to be part of, and we know like they're going to have opted into that. So when they go to the community college and they go to the 4-year, like in some sense, we've been talking about them as a particular major or whatever. And so when we do our baseline, is that for all the majors, or are we developing some kind of thing students can opt in to count, right? Like, I mean, it's just a number of like, what's our baseline? Like, is it 0 because we haven't had a pathway before? And now, or we're counting all mechanical engineering majors in some way?
Yeah. It depends is the least satisfying answer, but I think there is an element of it depends and sort of how it is that you're structuring. But I think most likely what will be most meaningful is to think about this at the program level. So for example, mechanical engineering. And so reasons why is 1, that's what will be trackable in data. 2, this grant goes through June 2026. And so, you're not going to see K-12 CTE students. It's unlikely that you will see many K-12 CTE students in a mechanical engineering 4-year, particularly if our K-12s are working with any students beyond seniors, which we certainly expect. And so I think we shouldn't necessarily think of this pathway as a longitudinal cohort-based experience alone, even if that's what you all are building, but rather thinking about kind of the programmatic experiences of students throughout the intersegmental partnership. Does that help? Yeah.
I have a question that kind of goes along with what you were just speaking on. When you said that this grant goes through June of 2026, does that mean that everything has to be expensed by June of 2026, including our round 1 that we've already received and now potentially round 2?
That is my understanding based on guidance from the state. John, has anything changed?
No, that's exactly right. The state says we need to spend all this money by June 30th, 2026.
Yeah, I think I could feel some tension in the room. Yeah, Kristen, were you going to add something?
No, thank you for that answer.
And just, for full context, that is a primary reason why we are pushing this forward in such a tight timeline, because we know that in itself is very challenging, and that timeline is very challenging. And the state has heard that, I think, from most collaboratives, but this is the bounds that folks are working in. Okay. So let's take just a quick look at the outcomes, and then I'll turn it back over to Anna. But I want to, and I'm actually going to switch my screen for just a minute to just walk through sort of what this looks like in practice. So we'll talk about this in a bit, but it can be really nice to use. We have this 3 little hamburger menu to be able to jump around to the application. So let's go to section 5, outcomes. So this you can think of as the outcome summary page. This is where the opportunity where you will share that baseline data and your targets for 2025 and 2026. I also want to note, this work can take a while to get off the ground. If you're not expecting to see any measurable changes in student outcomes in 2025, note that. And I think be upfront about that, and then add in your June 2026 target. So we have a line, and then for each segmental partner, or each segment, excuse me, I should say, we're asking for baseline and targets for enrollment, persistence, completion, and so forth here. And then notably, the enrollment is actually going to populate throughout all the tabs so that you have that reference for the students that you're working to serve. Okay, so let's hop to another tab now. Let's look at outcomes, enroll, persist, and complete. So here on this tab, we have, again, the short-term outcomes. So we have a section for enrollment, persistence, and completion. And then we'll ask, what are the key activities your partnership will implement to achieve this outcome? Which partners will be implementing these activities, and how will they collaborate? We will also ask specifically, how will the proposed activities achieve the intended outcomes? Include supporting references and evidence. Per John's reference earlier about the commitment to be data informed and evidence informed, this is the opportunity for you to share either research or that lived experience and evidence from the work that you've done in the past, to really help explain your logic around why you're expecting these outcomes to yield these intended impacts for students. And then again, this is where you can identify which pathway design elements are these activities most aligned with. Spoiler alert, likely the increased enrollment, persistence, and completion within the pathway on this tab. So this is really, again, something that the partners should be filling out together. It's also something notably, though, that should really depend on the needs in your pathway. So maybe you're finding that actually a lot of students are enrolling in your pathway, but you're not seeing the levels of socioeconomically disadvantaged students, but you're not seeing the levels of persistence or completion that you want to see. Maybe you are seeing that at the K-12 level, but not at the community college level. So this is also about really tailoring what is the work that you're doing based on the needs and reporting that here. Similarly, we have the experiential learning, work-based learning questions here. This is where you'll see those check boxes for the recovery with equity strategies. So again, we can imagine if you're doing work-based learning, that could be inclusive and engaging equity-oriented learning environments. It could also be inclusive supports that retain students. And maybe if it's happening at the K-12 level, it's also supporting college preparation and early credit. So you may actually end up fulfilling most of those recovery with equity strategies right there. And then we could imagine that it's most likely to align to the pathway design element around work-based learning. So those are the tabs that you would fill out collaboratively. And then again, we have that similar structure here for K-12 and so forth. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I'm seeing some questions in the chat. Okay, just there we are. Okay, reshared. Excellent. All right. I think with that, then I may turn things over to you, Ayana. Do you want me to keep sharing, or do you want to take over?
I can take over. Let me get to the slide.
I think I asked her to do that 2 slides before we planned, so sorry about it. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. All right, so the next 2 sections will be sections 6 and 7. Section 6, the California College Guidance Initiative. There are 3 questions within that section. They're going to ask you to describe the K-12 partners' current implementation of CCGI, identify any additional support needed to implement CCGI by 2026, and describe how post-secondary partners will leverage CCGI data. Section 7 on evaluation and continuous improvement will be asking you 2 questions. The first being to explain your plans for continuous improvement, and then describe how you will use data for continuous improvement. And so again, these sections will require collaboration amongst the partners to answer, particularly that third question with the CCGI on how partners will leverage data. It's going to really require you all to plan out thoughtfully how you're going to utilize that CCGI data. And I'll pass it to you, Alex.
Excellent. Okay. So then there's also a budget. So each partner will provide a budget with the following spending categories: salaries and wages, employment benefits, travel, materials and supplies, consultants and contracts, and others. Partners are each allowed up to 5% of indirect costs. And there is also a question around sharing existing or projected funding sources that will be leveraged to support this work. I want to note that it was very intentional that we're not asking about how this work and the funding will be sustained, because we know it can be a very difficult question. Rather, we hope that the changes and that you'll be leveraging funds to do systemic changes that will outlast the length of the grant. That said, we also know that this work is very intertwined with other priorities. And so we're hoping that you'll share any other funding that will be used and aligned with this that can kind of grow the impact of the work. So, there is a budget template with tabs that each partner will fulfill out their own based on however much of their funding of the overall partnership funding that they will be using for their specific activities. That budget will then be used to again create the contract with the prime funder. And then that will also be aggregated onto, I think at this point, it's actually a sub-regional level. So your collaborative staff are here to help with that as well. Okay, back to you, Ayana.
Thank you. Okay, so now I want to share a few tips on using the Google Sheet. Firstly, as Alex mentioned, you do have to make a copy of the Google Sheet and share it with intersegmental partners for collaboration. And this also requires the person who's making a copy to have a Google account. So preferably if you have a Google account with your institution, that's what you should be using. As Alex showed you, there's a navigation menu feature to help you navigate throughout the application. Then I'm going to screen share in just a few seconds to show you these other tips on how to insert additional roles as needed, insert bullet points to make a list, add comments for collaborators to see and respond to, and to also make sure you proceed cautiously when copying and pasting because you can overwrite someone's information. So let me pull up the sheet. And these tips are also on this overview page right here. So don't feel the need to note these down or remember them. I provided them here along with some screenshots and notes for you. So firstly, when it comes to the partners, for example, if you have more partners than this space allows for, you can right click and insert a role there. And you can do that as many times as needed to allow for you to showcase all of your partners. The next tip is around the bullet points. So if you're using a PC computer, you can do Alt-8, and that will give you a bullet point. And then also Alt-Enter, and that'll help you go down to another row to create that bulleted list. On a Mac, instead of using Alt, it would be the Option key so that you can make that list. In order to add comments, you can right-click the cell, and there's a space here for you to add a comment. You can tag anyone so that they can receive an email, a notification that there's something that they need to respond to. You can also add a comment from up here. Insert comment. There's two ways to add comments. Next, when it comes to copying and pasting, so just to show you, I will copy and paste here, Control C and Control V to copy and paste. So we have our text here. If I was to just do that again, it will overwrite everything that was originally in that cell. So to avoid doing that, you will need to double click in the cell and then paste. So that's very important, especially if you are typing up your narrative in a Word document or somewhere else and then bringing it into the Google Sheet. If there's something already there because you guys are working on this collaboratively, one of your partners has already responded to the question, just make sure that when you're pasting, you're not overwriting their content. Any questions about the Google Sheets and any usability features or concerns?
Hannah, can you show the cell history?
Yes.
Feature?
So if you right click the cell, there's a section here, show edit history. and that will show you the person who edited it and what that edit was. And you can click the arrow to go back. So if there's ever anything where you accidentally overrided something, you'll be able to find it here. And you could just copy and paste it and put it back. All right, I can go back to our presentation. Any questions about the application?
I have a question. I'm with a K-12 district, and I'm wondering, can we use our adult ed program as part of this? Because we are going to be expanding CTE and potentially the nursing program. Would that be something that we could use?
We've been limiting this to the K-16 students, and so we're not including adult programs. There's just not enough resources to spread them as widely. So we're focusing on the students in K-16.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have a question in terms of the partners. I know that in the first cycle, and I don't know if this was because that was the first cycle, we did it differently, but in terms of minimum requirements or meeting certain demographic, low socioeconomic student population, is that something that is one of the criteria to become a partner?
Well, the K-12 districts are limited to the equity criteria that we set out, which are school districts with 55% of their students on free or reduced lunch, or homeless youth, or foster youth. And so we've targeted our outreach to those K-12 districts. And if someone else comes in, we would look at the CalPADS data and we want to be as inclusive as possible, but we are, with the millions of dollars sounds like a lot of money, but we are trying to reach the schools where we might be able to have the greatest impact.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that was somewhere someone was looking at that. Got it. Thank you.
Chance.
So if an institution ends up on multiple partnership pathways, and then they're going to get funding. So if I'm understanding correctly, each partnership is going to have a contract with Santa Cruz.
Yeah, our financial backbone is UC Santa Cruz, and so all contracts run through UC Santa Cruz.
So if I'm in a partnership with Cuesta and Lucia Mar, and we're going to do something, then all three of us would have some contract for however we decide to divvy up the allotment that we're given.
Exactly. If your partnership would be able to earn $500,000, and you choose to whatever way you choose it up to divvy it up, then each institution would have a contract with UC Santa Cruz as our fiscal agent for the collaborative.
Okay, so then if Cal Poly is on multiple partnerships, then is that going to be multiple contracts, or are you going to combine all those things into one contract?
I think we would work to try to combine them into one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think we're at time, so maybe we can go to the last slide, which gives us, just the information about where to go next. So you have the contact information from John, Ashley, and Isaac. There will be drop-in assistance on Zoom every Tuesday from 2 to 3 p.m. And then we have the 2 template links here, which we'll get in the chat again. And as I understand, there will be a webinar recording, and we'll be working on FAQs to come out. Those FAQs will be added to the instructions and guidance document as well. So.
we'll be looking to add this recording to our website as quickly as possible. I want to thank everyone for being here today and for Alex and her staff for the great job they did in putting together this application and this presentation, and to the collaborative staff of Ashley, Isaac, Bree, who support the collaborative and all of its members every day. Thank you for being here.